Riley Morgan was 22, the kind of young woman who drew grids in a notebook before she drew breath on a trail. Her Utah solo trek had been circled on the calendar for months, a winter shoulder plan across the Uinta-Wasatch Cache National Forest that she and her dad had rehearsed like a flight checklist. Michael Morgan had walked through every item with her: bare canister, water treatment, layers, hard copy maps, in-reach fallback, proud and nervous in equal measure. They made a pack that fit Riley's style. A 3-day, I'm good text, short, unfussy, automatic reassurance. The first ping was due at dusk on day 3. It never landed. By sunrise on day 4, silence stopped feeling like solitude and started feeling like a wall. Michael stared at his phone, so long the screen dimmed, then locked, then rose again with the same blank thread. He replayed their last exchange. A hug at the rental car, the shoulder bounce of her pack, the steel clip of trekking poles hitting the first footbridge. In the photo he took there, timed smile, square stance, Riley looked fearless in a violet base layer, glasses glinting, a lemon-bright sleeping bag lashed high on the pack like a banner. She joked that the color made her unmissable from space. Now the color felt like a dare the mountain had accepted. Michael tried to rationalize. Dead battery? Maybe she'd hiked a canyon, that ate signal. Riley carried a small solar panel and treated battery life like rationing water. But she also treated commitments like knots he couldn't pull free without tools. Missing the window wasn't her. On day 5, he called, texted, then called again, watching each ring fold into voicemail. By dawn of day 6 he'd measured, then overshot the line between patience and denial. He drove to his Portland precinct, feeling absurdly far from a crisis made of rock, snow, and pine. The sergeant at the desk listened without hurry, eyes soft with the kind of fatigue that learns names and keeps them. Michael laid out dates, itinerary, last check-in, and finally the bridge photo, the one where optimism was still a living thing. The phone calls leapt state lines. Utah got the alert. Within hours, Summit County Search and Rescue spun up, ground teams, a hello sweep, radios ticking like metronomes. The national forest sprawled out in every direction, canopied drainages, shoulder-high deadfall, and trails that faded into game track. Riley's sedan turned up at the proper lot, locked and neat, like it had been parked by a person who expected a return before dark. Nothing looked disturbed. No helpful mess presented itself. The first day was hope and movement. By the third, the search grid widened and the optimism thinned. Helicopters combed the canopy for a scrap of violet or a sun-yellow curl of fabric. Boot lines traced creeks and ridge spines, circling out from trail junctions and likely bivvy sites. No torn strap, no broken pole, no sign of fall or fight. The mountain said nothing and meant it. When early snow dusted the higher bowls, the official search scaled down the way campfires dim, reluctantly, then all at once. The file didn't close, it cooled. Michael went home with a copy of the photograph and a house that sounded larger than it had ever been. In Riley's room, the air held the last notes of her shampoo. A paperback lay cracked open with the receipt as a spine splint, and a topo map of the high Uintas pinned above the desk showed a red pen route that had looked so tidy on paper. He called investigators weekly, then monthly, then on the schedule sorrow sets for you. He learned the vocabulary of waiting, active tips, no signs of foul play, exhausted all current leads. The phrases did the polite work of holding air in the lungs. They didn't change the math. Somewhere between a footbridge and a horizon line, his daughter had gone missing, and there wasn't a mark on the world to argue otherwise. The first winter turned the forest into a clean page that forgot what had been written on it. Tracks that might have told a story became drifts. Scuffs became smooth. A handful of volunteers kept at it on weekends when weather and work allowed. Michael learned the oscent tricks that grieving parents trade in late-night messages. How to read SAR maps, where unofficial forums collect speculation, which rumors deserve a polite nod and a hard delete. The routine kept his hands busy. It did not shrink the void. In a file room 2 states over, Riley's case kept a place on a shelf. In 2014, it moved from a desk stack to the long memory of a cabinet. Cold is not a verdict. It's a temperature setting. It means the case will wake if heat returns. Detective Mark Ellison noticed it the way pattern-minded people notice a hanging thread. He didn't promise miracles, just the discipline of rereads. Every few months he pulled a binder, set the bridge photo at an angle on his blotter, and let the yellow sleeping bag jab it as I like it had the first time. He couldn't shake the feeling that the story was too clean. No animal sign, no slip marks at a cliff, no weak link gouged into the gear list. In spring 2015, Ellison rolled his chair from paper to silicon. Riley's laptop had been imaged early and skimmed for the obvious. Emails, recent docs, then archived. He asked for the whole diet. Caches, cookies, dust bunnies under digital furniture. He found what hikers find. Gear reviews, stove debates, the eternal wars over filter brands and boot widths. Then he found a bookmark to a forum whose CSS had retired years earlier. Ridgeline Collective, a text-first clubhouse for ultralight zealots. The public threads were arguments about grams saved and routes stitched across shoulder seasons. Hidden deeper, a private message Shane blinked in the logs. Riley's handle, Riley M., had traded notes with a user called Wraithwalker. In public posts, Wraith preached a creed about vanishing as virtue. Walk like wind, leave no print the grid can read. In private, his tone shifted. Less sermon, more seduction. You don't want quiet, he wrote. You want to pass through the world as if it never had you. Riley's replies were cautious, then curious. She asked about off-map spurs and ghost lines connecting meadows no trail touched. A week before her departure, Wraith wrote, Uintas reward ghosts. I can show you where maps lie. Ellison felt the pulse of a near lead and did the tedious dance that follows. The host company that had once served Ridgeline had changed hands. Servers had moved. Retention policies had eaten their own tails. Subpoenas stacked. IPs resolved to libraries and cafes and the ephemera of 2011. Then one login pinged a university machine under a student account. The real-world name attached, Scott Walters, didn't match the snarling mystique of Wraithwalker. Osint pulled blogs and think pieces about unplugging and purity. For a week, the room hummed. Then the calendar closed its fist. Walters had left the country months before Riley's trip. His passport never bounced back through the right doors during the window that mattered. Ellison made the call he hated to make. A promising thread was, in fact, just twine. The file went back to the cabinet heavier by a few printouts, and the faint burn of embarrassment every investigator knows. Years do what they do, stack. The Morgan house held its quiet. The trailheads took new boots, and the world did not rearrange itself around an absence just because it should have. In June 2018, a small aluminum boat drifted across a lake that wasn't on Riley's plan. It was an early summer day, made for long lunches and unhurried casts. Noah Baxter, 19 and sunburn on the nose, cut his trolling motor and let the breeze do the work near a cooler, deeper cove. The water was clearer than usual, the bottom a patchwork of rock and silt. A sliver of yellow flashed below the surface where muted greens should have had the palette to themselves. Trash, he thought first. Irritation beating curiosity by a nose. Then the shape argued with him. He paddled back and leaned over the gunnel. Not a tarp, not flat, an oblong, bound burden that threw back the sun in little glints where wire kissed chain. His mouth went dry. Jokes about Halloween props died on his tongue. He called his dad first because sons do, and the older voice that answered did not panic. It issued instructions. Don't touch it. Motor off. Mark your spot. Go to the ramp. Call the sheriff. Summit County deputies cut across Sable Lake, throwing a short siren burst more to part gossip than geese. Noah pointed, then kept a distance that made him feel useful and useless at the same time. Within the hour, the cove wore a perimeter of bright buoys. A dive team unrolled hoses in calm. Practice talk. 2 beams of headlamp light stitched into the green-brown murk. The divers found exactly what rumor had already built. A sleeping bag, sun yellow beneath lake slime, cinched with rusted baling wire and pinned with the heavy punctuation of 2 iron plates. The kind you load on a barbell, the kind that sink what you don't want found. A winch whined. The bundle rose like something the water regretted holding. Mud sheeted off to reveal a brand that would matter later. On the ramp, under a tent that smelled of bleach and pond and quiet, cameras clicked in workmanlike sequence. Bolt cutters worried through wire loops until the last one snapped and the tension sighed out of the nylon skin. The body inside was badly decomposed. It was also unmistakably male. The case split on contact. The lake was now a homicide scene with a John Doe who had traveled wrapped in a striking piece of gear. The sleeping bag's make and model went into databases that never sleep. A state records clerk, one of those meticulous professionals who make or break cases by refusing to be bored, read the bulletin about bright yellow bag and felt a tug of recognition. She queried long-term missing persons for that odd detail. One report from 2012 surfaced with a photograph where a lemon-colored tube-rode shotgun on a pack frame. The name on the missing file was Riley Morgan. Ellison received the cross-reference with a jolt that made him sit back from his screen. For 6 years, the yellow had been taunt in theory. Now it was evidence with lake water in its seams. He called Michael, and the kindest version of a cruel update left Portland and landed in a father's ear. We found her sleeping bag. It held someone else. Dental work gave the John Doe a name. Liam Parker, 24, out of Phoenix. Reported missing the same week Riley vanished. 2 families who had never met were now linked by a piece of nylon and a set of barbell plates. The question that ate the room wasn't subtle. Where is Riley? But the questions under were worse. Was Riley targeted with Liam? With him? Before him? After? A joint task group took shape, the kind assembled when cases collide and jurisdictional fences need gates cut fast. Captain Gene Carver, a veteran of old files and stubborn truths, tacked photos and maps to a wall until Utah wore colored pins like constellations. Riley on one side, violet shirt, fierce grin, the bridge. Liam on the other, desert skyline behind him, a chain of hikes posted to socials that now read like foreshadowing. Carver's first principle was simple. Coincidence is rare. Connection is messy. Start by looking for the thread. Detectives fanned out to Portland and Phoenix, knocking on doors that had heard every question before and none of the right ones. Friends who had been background characters in 2012 became crucial now. One of Riley's college acquaintances, Jenna Collins, remembered coffee a month before the trip and Riley's excitement about a trail friend from an online community who'd be in Utah around the same time. No name, but Arizona came up. A little shiver went through the room where Carver's team kept its hours. The solo trip might never have been solo. Carver ordered the indignity every grieving parent fears but understands. Go through Riley's things again, carefully, reverently, thoroughly. Michael had saved a banker's box packed by agents 6 years earlier. In it, magazines, paperback mysteries, bundles of maps tamed by rubber bands. Analyst Carla Diaz took the stack and treated paper like evidence and relic both. Most maps were clean. One, a crisp Zion National Park sheet, coughed up a torn corner of an old business card when unfolded. Light in a kitschy font. A Utah area code beneath a partial number. Business listings from 2012 turned light into Starlight Motor Inn, a freeway-tired motel in a town that interstates and postcards had both learned to ignore. The pins on Carver's wall shuffled. Trailhead, Sable Lake, a dot where Phoenix meets memory, and at the center, a sad neon star. The Starlight Motor Inn wasn't off the beaten path, so much as abandoned by it. The sign buzzed and failed and buzzed again, offering up stray syllables to the highway wind. The owner on duty, Orville, said he bought the headache a few years back and the past didn't come with the keys. He pointed to a back room where damp cardboard learned new shapes and told the detectives to wear masks if they were fussy. They were fussy. Paper mold is less romantic than it sounds. For 2 days, Diaz and another investigator sifted receipts and tax forms and lists that had been written to be thrown away. At the bottom of a box of laminated menus, Diaz's fingers touched a ledger book, the old kind with a fake leather cover and lines that made managers feel like they owned time. September 2012 arrived with a flip. Most names were the lies people tell when they want a bed and anonymity. One notation in the margin next to room 7 was real enough to raise heart rates. Silver sedan. AZ plates. Parked out back. Complained about AC. Liam Parker had left a silver sedan with Arizona tags at a trailhead and never come back for it. Someone had brought a twin to room 7. The book proved a car and time frame. Carver wanted a face. Former employees had scattered the way motel staff do. Leads broke or changed numbers. The old manager had died. A former cleaner, Beatrice Rowe, agreed to meet if the coffee was decent and the questions weren't stupid. She was late 50s, tired in the honest way. At first, the week in question was a smear of cigarette haze and laundry soap. Photographs did what memory sometimes needs. They gave a handle. Riley's bridge smile made Beatrice go still. Liam's head tilt grin did the same. And then she spoke about a third presence who hadn't signed anything. He was older, she said, lining up sugar packets without realizing. A harm man. The kind that doesn't need to be loud to fill a room. He came and went from room 7 over 2 days. The second night, Beatrice pushed her cart past the door and heard an argument. A young man's voice pitched high, an older one under it, low and dangerous. A heavy thud that made her arms prickle. Silence that rang. She finished her shift quickly and didn't call. You didn't call the cops from the Starlight unless you were ready to roll dice with your safety. A day or two later, early, with sky the color of an eraser, she saw the older man wrestling something long and heavy, blanket-wrapped, into the trunk of the silver sedan. A young woman stood by, face hollowed out like it had been scooped. The man said something that was more order than request. The woman got in the passenger seat. They drove away. She never saw them again. The room where Carver's task force worked got very quiet when the account ended. Story threads that had been slack tightened all at once. Liam wasn't lost. He'd been killed where cheap AC hiccups and paint peels. Riley wasn't off trail by choice. She'd been taken as witness or leverage or proof. The older man was no longer a rumor with shoulders. He was the center of gravity. The question became who he was and how to make the identification stick in court. Witnesses' age. Defense attorneys cross-examined harder than grief. Circumstance needed company. Money, phones, and the boring data that criminals think they've buried under caution. Carver's team pivoted to Liam's life with a kind of ruthless sympathy. The easygoing hiker's story is sometimes true, sometimes a veil. Bank records from 2012 came in on subpoenas that took months to grind through archives. Diaz spotted deposits just under reporting thresholds, regular, neat, and not a match for Liam's legitimate pay. Overlaying his travel with the timing of those deposits drew lines to odd places. Secondary airports, light industrial cul-de-sacs, trailheads near roads no one photographs for brochures. It built a picture no one wanted, but everyone recognized. Liam had been moving something for someone who liked using hikers as cover. Phone work is slow magic. The primary number yields not much. Towers whisper patterns. Burners pretend to be ghosts. Cross-referencing pings near Liam's routine put one anonymous number in uncomfortable proximity, too often to be chance. The purchase of that prepaid handset had been made with a credit card. A small ego mistake buried under a dozen cautious habits. The name on the receipt, Raymond Sykes. Sykes had a file that tasted like copper. Assaults that pled down. Extortion cases that collapsed when witnesses forgot. He was a logistics man for the wrong kind of inventory. Good at routes, better at making people feel small. His last mugshot showed a face that matched Beatrice's hard man with unpleasant precision. Carver resisted the urge to sprint. You build slow when you want a wall to hold. The working theory arranged itself with sick logic. Liam had been a courier. He wanted out. He asked Riley, new friend from an online hiking niche, to meet in Utah, maybe to keep him honest, maybe to keep someone else from tipping into violence. The Starlight was the lousy middle point that no one would check on purpose. The argument in room 7 was the break. The thud was a body's last punctuation mark. Riley became not just a witness. She became a liability Sykes needed to manage. A theory is a bridge. You still have to cross it with weight. Carver's team tailed the financial crumbs to people Sykes had touched a decade ago. The names led to cousins of cousins, then to a rental application in 2013 in a working-class Boise neighborhood, where the lawns fought valiantly against dandelions. The applicant was David Vosen, a quiet man who paid in cash out of job site envelopes and grew tomatoes in a tidy rectangle. Cameras from a safe distance caught a profile. Facial recognition put a 98% match to the old Sykes booking photo. The ghost had picked a different spelling and a smaller life. There was no battering ram theater. Carver wanted Sykes whole and talkative. 2 unmarked cars. A knock. A coffee mug set down with exaggerated calm. Handcuffs that clicked like someone closing a suitcase before a trip he wouldn't enjoy. In an interview room colder than it needed to be, Sykes tried denial by monotony. Never heard of him. Never been there. You got the wrong guy. Ellison slid paperwork across the table with the bored competence of a man who knows how cases are built. Bank statements with neat red circles. A map of cell tower pings that followed Liam like a second shadow. A photo of a ledger line that ignored fake names and instead cared about an Arizona plate. Sykes' jaw ticked once at the burner data. It was the first honest thing he'd done in hours. Ellison mentioned a witness, didn't name Beatrice, and described the argument and the thud and the pre-dawn trunk. He described the young woman with the emptied-out face. The room's HVAC hummed. Sykes calculated. Career criminals don't feel remorse. They do math. The numbers were bad. "What's the deal?" he asked finally, voice flat as soda. "There's no deal for murder," Ellison said. "Just whether a jury hears your story or ours." Sykes talked. He told a plain. Liam had been his runner, paid in cash, used for the plausible deniability hikers were like fleece. He wanted out and thought a friend in the room would help. Sykes called that stupid. The blow that killed Liam was a single, brutal correction. Riley was forced to clean the scene, to help move what grief would later have to name. They drove to Sable Lake because Sykes knew it, and he wrapped Riley's own sleeping bag around the body because cruelty also loves convenience. The weights were cheap and heavy. The wire was ugly and effective. He described dominance like it was a tool in a kit, then let the sentence hang when Ellison asked what happened next. "Protective custody," Sykes said. "I've got enemies." Ellison didn't barter. He offered the only honest thing available. "Tell us where, and we'll tell the DA you cooperated." Sykes asked for a pen and drew a crude map. Dirt road spidering through high desert on the Utah-Nevada shoulder. A cluster of rocks sketched like 3 bad teeth, an X where the land keeps secrets. The convoy bumped through a landscape built from understatement. Pale ground, gray scrub, a horizon that refused to get closer. The late summer sun put a glare on everything, even resolve. Agents lined out on a grid because that's what you do when you don't know whether to pray to find or to pray to fail. Landmarks from Sykes' drawing appeared, but they did it coyly. Rusted cistern, lightning-scarred juniper, a fork that had been 2 choices and a single regret. The spot announced itself with something barely more than suggestion. A darker rectangle of soil near the base of a rock, stubborn weeds in a shape that flowers don't prefer. Brushes first, then trowels, then gloved hands that had done this before and hated that they had. A scrap of fabric purpled by time. Then bone. You can be right and still feel ruined by it. The call went to Portland. Michael answered. The noise on the line changed the room's temperature by a few degrees. The team did the work that gives families what bureaucracy calls closure and what language doesn't have a good word for. The desert gave Riley back. The legal machine, which is not quick but can be relentless, set about the rest. Sykes was charged in a stack that carried enough years to build a life and bury it twice. 2 counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and more. He would never breathe free air again. The court did its rituals. Arraignment, motions, voir dire, testimony that was careful with the ugliest facts. Beatrice sat in the hallway a long time after hers, hands curled around a cooling paper cup. Ellison nodded to her once when they both looked up at the same moment. Michael buried his daughter in a place that knows how to sound like peace. He kept the bridge photo on a shelf because it is possible to honor the moment before the world changed without pretending the world didn't. In the house, a map still hangs with a red line across places that exist in different ways now. Paper lines, legal lines, lines of father crosses in memory. He sometimes stands before it and touches the place where the pack looked too heavy and the smile looked too bright and the sleeping bag looked like the safest color in the world. There are endings that don't feel like endings so much as changes in weather. The case file is closed, which is a bureaucratic verb, not an emotional one. The questions that used to howl now mutter. The online forums moved on to the next disappearance, because there's always a next. In Ellison's office, the bridge photo no longer lives on the blotter, but it hasn't gone back in the cabinet either. It leans against a wall under a shelf where a handful of other faces live. The yellow in that image still catches light in a way that feels like both warning and welcome. On some mornings, Michael makes 2 mugs of coffee out of habit more than hope, then pours one into the sink before it goes cold because he isn't ready to give up the ritual and isn't ready to pretend he needs it. Grief is time's least obedient student. It learns in loops. If you ask Carver what solved the case, he'll tick boxes. Ledger line, clerk's memory, Diaz's eye, phone math, a witness who told the truth when it was hard, and a confession that was really just a cornered man rearranging the furniture of his future. If you ask him what mattered, he'll say something softer. People who refuse to forget. People who read yellow as a lead, not a color. The internet will do a bad job with a story like this because it loves single causes and clean heroes. This one had neither. It had a young woman who planned well and met an old danger. A young man who made bad deals and tried to listen to his conscience too late. A hard man who fed on control until the world boxed him and took the menu away. It had a father who refused to let language flatten his daughter into remains located, and a detective who believed that a case sleeping is not a case dead. There are other truths that don't fit in charge sheets. Riley's caution saved time later. Her check-in rule moved clocks in the right direction when waiting would have been worse. Liam's mistake was real, and so was his attempt to step off the conveyor belt. Beatrice's fear in 2012 made sense. Her courage in 2018 mattered more. Diaz's attention to a torn corner of cardstock turned a wall into a door. A clerk in a state office looked at bright yellow and refused to shrug. These are not the kinds of heroics that get hashtags. They're the ones that carry weight. There's a version of this story that ends at a lake when a bundle breaks the surface. There's a version that ends at a map with an X. There's the legal version that ends with a sentence length that means a man will die indoors. The family version doesn't end at all. It threads itself through holidays and quick glances at hikers on trailheads, and the moment every storm rolls and where someone thinks about signal strength and doesn't say it out loud. If you wanted a moral, you could misquote one, that the mountain is always innocent, people aren't. Or that solitude attracts both the seekers and the watchers. Better to settle for this. Planning is love in action. Checking in is respect turned practical. And when something bright shows up in dark water, you listen to the kid who saw it first and the parent whose voice steadied him. The yellow sleeping bag doesn't get to be just a prop. It was chosen because Riley thought she'd be easier to spot. She was right in a way that breaks and heals at once. The bag didn't save her. Years later, it spoke for her. Sometimes that's the distance between silence and movement, a thing you bought on sale because the color made sense. Carver boxed up the case's copies and sent the originals to where originals go. Ellison kept one photo and a photocopy of the ledger page. Michael keeps a key on a hook because it feels wrong not to. The forest does what forests do, repair and forget, while people do what people do, remember and repair. Utah's maps don't show ghosts, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. They're just quiet until someone listens in the right direction. On certain evenings, if you stand on the first footbridge a mile from a winter trailhead and hold still long enough, wind on nylon sounds like breathing. It's just physics. It feels like race. By the time reporters stopped calling, the story had already joined the stack each of them carries. Utah hiker, yellow sleeping bag, lake map. Michael learned to answer only when he wanted to, and to say no the rest of the time without apologizing. He spoke at one SER fundraiser about batteries and packs, and how a check-in isn't paranoia, it's kindness. He didn't hold the mic long. People clapped anyway. The Ridgeline forum went offline, then back up under a new owner who didn't allow private messages without verification. Threads still argue about grams and boots. Somewhere in those archives is a record of a user who liked to preach vanishing. Men like they're less rare than we want, and less mythical than they want. The lesson isn't to fear trails. It's to question anyone who tells you disappearing is a form of purity. Beatrice changed jobs. She keeps a plant alive on a windowsill at a place where the hallways don't smell like stale beer. Sometimes she catches herself lining up sugar packets and thinks of a violet shirt and a hollowed face and decides that remembering is a tax she can afford now that it bought something. Diaz got promoted, which is beside the point to her, and absolutely the point to the kinds of cases that need people like her to stay. Carver retired a year later than he said he would, because he'd promised himself he'd see this one through. Ellison still reads old files like they might rearrange themselves if he stares kindly enough. Once in a while they do. As for Sykes, there isn't much to say that doesn't risk giving him the dignity of a sinner he didn't earn. He is an inmate number and a man whose primary environment now is concrete and a set of rules he didn't write. That's fine. The story isn't his. Riley's friends hike sometimes in pairs now, which is neither superstition nor surrender, just an adjustment you make when life teaches a class you didn't sign up for. They text when they hit the car, a habit that feels like overkill until it feels like oxygen. One of them still has Riley's laminated routes and alternates card and takes it out before spring trips, not because the route applies, but because the handwriting does. If you came here looking for a clean bow, the best I can offer is tidy edges on the paperwork and a grave that faces good light. The rest of it is mess and love, and the way people keep showing up for each other, even after they didn't, once. There's a bridge out there with the imprint of a boot that no one can see, but everyone should try to imagine. There's a father whose last text still lives on a phone because deleting it would be a kind of pretend that doesn't help. And there's a bright yellow sleeping bag that did not save a life, but helped tell the truth about two of them. In the ledger of what matters, that counts. Some stories end in a courtroom. Others end in a map with an X. This one ends with a father who never stopped asking, and a clue that finally spoke. If Riley's story moved you, share this with one person. It helps families keep attention on the names that shouldn't be forgotten. If you hike, tell someone your route, set a check-in, keep the bright gear. Small habits save time when time matters most. For carefully told disappearances and the single detail that changes everything. Thanks for watching. This was Alibi Stories.